Howdy, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Stats and Scars, recording every Thursday releasing at 7 a.m. We got another edition with me, Jared May, the host, as well as the Analyst, the Ball Whisperer this week. That's right. Welcome back into the show. Appreciate you joining again. Shout out to Cuzzo with the newborn. Loving that for his family, so he'll be back eventually. But he's helping me out with the injury report, so I'll be handling injury report once again this week. We got some fun ones. But if you're a first-time listener, you can find us by searching at Shadow the Script across all platforms. So if you go into Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube by searching Shadow the Script, you will see the golden arched logo with STS, and each video is categorized by Stats and Scars, Challenge the Script, and Shadow the Script. And then if you want to find our video content or our tweets, you can search Shadow the Script on X, TikTok, or Instagram. TikTok is where I post the most video content. X is where I post the most common sense, logical arguments of all time. Such as the Caleb Williams one that I just posted a while back. Okay, so here's how the outline of the episode is going to go. You try to keep it under an hour per usual. That way everyone's in here, in and out, getting their information and going back to the voting polls. Okay. Yeah, so we're going to start with...
By the time this airs, we might know. So
we're actually airing this on Election Day, so there's probably going to be some jokes, but...
There's either going to be...
We should be at the polls.
Everybody's going to be listening to this episode, and we're all going to be in Armageddon by Friday. So.
Yeah. Stats and Scars has released... Yeah. So, all right. Injuries will be first, along with the down bad list following that. The stats is going to be the second addition to the episode with the stat phenomena per week. And then we're going to do our predictions and recaps for NFL. And then we'll get into our one winner and one loser from college football and predict the Alabama at LSU game. But let's get right into it. So the injuries. As I mentioned, I'm taking over for medical guy 4 now, so I promise it's not as good as what he does. But we'll start out with Jamison Williams for the Detroit Lions. He's going to be returning from his 2-game suspension. Not an injury, but just kind of classifying, hey, he's going to be back. Should be cleared hot to return for their game in Houston this weekend. T. Higgins with the quadriceps injury. He is going to be questionable throughout the week. I'm assuming this is going to be a week-to-week injury, so just monitor that and prepare for the worst. DK Metcalf, the grade 1 MCL sprain, was almost on track to return last week. I'm going to assume he's going to be probable to return this week, but we shall see. Zach Moss, the running back for the Cincinnati Bengals, went to the IR with a neck injury. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that he's out for the season, but... The Bengals made an in-season trade to acquire Khalil Herbert from the Chicago Bears for a 7th-round draft pick. Additionally, Chase Brown for the Cincinnati Bengals is also questionable, or not also questionable, but also hurt with a rib injury, and he's going to be questionable to return this Sunday. So Khalil Herbert might be an immediate plug-and-play, or maybe my fighting Texas Aggie Travion Williams, that's a huge throwback of a running back, might get some work for the Bengals. He's been on their running back 3 list for a while now. Rookie Keon Coleman for the Buffalo Bills hurt his wrist in the Sunday game versus the Miami Dolphins. A 61-yard bomb from Tyler Bass to win that game, by the way. He's undergoing tests. They said he underwent the test on Monday, but there has not been any updated news, according to my knowledge, on Keon Coleman, but just monitor that. I'm assuming he's probably going to be a day.
I don't think it's that big of an injury from what I was reading. I have him on one of my fantasy teams, and I was reading up on it. I don't think it's... I think he'll be playing Sunday.
Okay, that's what I assume. He'll probably be limited throughout the week. And then I kind of categorize this one as the 49ers because there's a lot of news returning, and I'll save the best for last, obviously. But Jordan Mason... shoulder injury kind of re-agitated it, had the bye week to recover. I'm assuming he'll be back, but he will be the handcuff moving forward. Deebo Samuel, ribs injury from the Dallas Cowboys game 2 weeks ago. I think this dude just continues to be hurt or sick. I don't think he's a trustworthy fantasy option for at least another 2 weeks, so we'll see what happens to him. And the best one of all time for all fantasy managers out there, including the analysts sitting in this room, Christian McCaffrey designated to return from IR this week. And I don't know, you probably know more than me about whether or not he's expected to play, but I'm assuming he's expected.
They opened up his practice window. He went through a rigorous simulated practice schedule last week, and they're saying that he's, barring any setbacks, he's supposed to get out there and practice. Mind you, they had a bye week last week, so you got that extra week of rest. And I think this was always kind of the plan, was for him to come back from after the bye week. So it sounds like he is back, barring any crazy setbacks during this week of practice, is what I've read. So
okay,
fantasy managers, we're back. If you have the number one overall mistake of picking Christian McCaffrey,
that's right. And hopefully today he skipped his rigorous practice window and went to the polls to vote. And then moving off from the 49ers, you had Jalen McMillan was inactive for the Monday Night Football game. This is kind of like their last guy outside of Sterling Shepard for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's questionable with a hamstring injury, something to monitor throughout the week. Hamstrings are always, to me, a week-to-week injury. Will Levis with the AC joint injury. He's hopeful to return this Sunday in Week 10. CeeDee Lamb, another AC joint injury in his shoulder, I believe will play. There could be a phantom IR moment with CeeDee Lamb. We might get into that a little bit later with what the Cowboys plan to do. I talked about it a little bit on my episode released Tuesday, but that'll be interesting to see what they do. Dak Prescott is another one with a hamstring injury that he is reportedly going to the IR. And we'll see how serious that injury is. And we have other reasons to why he should remain on the IR for the rest of the season. Not for performance, just for, anyway. Dallas Goedert has been dealing with a hamstring injury. I swear on everything, hamstring injuries are just plaguing the NFL as of late. He's week to week still. Something I would just consider him doubtful for this week. Maybe he's going to return in a limited fashion. But yeah, that wraps up my injury list for this week. A lot of names in there. I tried to pick out the most important. Some that you might have in a 12-man. A lot that you are going to have in a 10-man. Just those relevant fantasy options. There are more injuries out there in terms of.
Did you mention Chris Olave? I might have missed that one.
No, but he's 100% got to be out. I mean,
oh yeah, he got smoked.
Yeah.
So.
I talked about him on my Shadow the Script episode because it kind of tied in with the Dennis Allen and Derek Carr thing, with Derek Carr just throwing absolute hospital balls nonstop. I mean, I think this is Olave's 6th or 7th concussion. I
think it's 4.
It's bad.
Yeah.
Regardless,
And that's his second one this year. It's becoming a Tua situation. So, I mean, it's bad.
Yeah. And you look at, concussions have increased highly since 2020, but you look at what the type of hits that he has taken in on when he's received these concussions and head injuries, and he's knocked out cold on almost all of them. And the catches on the routes that he's running, he's like in position to catch them. It's just he's getting Cam Chancellored in the middle of the field. I feel really, really bad from T's and P's for Chris Olave. He got carted off with the head injury. I would say he's doubtful to. I believe he'll probably go on IR. But yeah, that wraps up my injury list. So I guess we'll move into the down bad list, the DB list. Unless you have any questions or statements for the injuries.
Nope. Just shout out Jacob for providing some of that, and
yeah,
I hope everything's going well with the baby. We should have him back maybe next week or the week after. So
yeah, he's on the IR.
Yeah, we put Jacob on his own IR.
Yeah, Jacob is on the IR. Yeah, no, he does a great job. So okay, DB list. I'll let you go first for your down bad list candidates. You're welcome to have more than one.
All right, I'll go one, and then I'll let you go. And then I've got 3. One of them we could kind of skip over, or I'll just cover real fast. But the first one that I thought was crazy was Jermaine Burton with the Bengals.
I don't know what happened to him. I know he has disciplinary issues.
Yeah, so what happened was from what I read, the Bengals, T. Higgins wasn't going to play. They still had Jamar Chase, which obviously Jamar Chase is, the best receiver on that team. But T. Higgins is a pretty good football player. So without T. Higgins, I think there were a lot of reports out that Burton was going to be really involved in the game plan. And he messed around all week. And then on Saturday during walkthrough, he was a no-show from what I read. He was a no-show Friday. No text, no call as to why. Then he showed up Saturday for the walkthrough in like pajamas, and then got to the game. They healthy scratched him, and then you saw everything that happened with Burrow. I don't know if you saw the video, but Burrow like sat on the bench, and people were saying that he was like saying, "Don't effing sit next to me." I don't know. It was kind of lip reading, kind of like the whole thing with Dak and CD. Like everybody was trying to figure out what they were saying, but it was pretty clear that a lot of people were upset with him, and he was like running around on the field or on the sideline, like jumping up and down, and like Burrow looked just pissed off. I mean, they won the game, no issues. They were playing the Raiders, but still, I mean, talk about having the perfect opportunity to kind of shine, and then you just kind of bullshit your way through the week and find out to be a healthy scratch. So I had him on the DB list. That was just a crazy story to come out of really a irrelevant Sunday of football. So that's my first one.
God, I didn't even see that.
There was I got on some thread from a Cincinnati reporter, and he was talking about how a lot of people were saying on like Thursday and Friday, like he's going to be a part of the game plan. He's going to be a big deal on Sunday, and then he just like healthy scratch.
Oh my God! Yeah, I know he had disciplinary issues with Nick Saban in college, so
yeah,
that doesn't really surprise me. But yeah, okay, yeah, mine was Dennis Allen for the New Orleans Saints. Dennis Allen
finally
was finally fired from the franchise. And what's so funny to me about this is like you see all the edits. There's this funny show where these callers call in and they start bashing the Saints and how basically pussified they've become with Dennis Allen as the head coach. And what's funny about the Dennis Allen firing is that he was fired for the first time in like 2014 with Derek Carr on the team then as well. So it's like you took a fired candidate and then hired him as your head coach, and then fired him again. You went from 2-0 to 2-7, the same record as the Panthers, losing to the Panthers. So this has just been a demoralizing season. And now you've become instant sellers at the deadline, and you trade Marshawn Lattimore, your best coverage guy, to Washington, which is a great trade, by the way.
Yeah, and they just keep putting themselves in some really crappy contracts. Like, I get wanting to keep Alvin Kamara, but add on to the Saints organization of just kind of handing out some questionable contracts. I mean, I swear, I think if I were them, I might have tried to move off of that, because everybody always talks about in the offseason how they're in cap hell, and they just keep adding on. Like, let's be honest, Kamara's getting a little old. Maybe you don't want to sign him to a contract because you need to rebuild. And they signed him to a 2-year, $27 million contract. That kind of sounds like an overpay to me. I don't really know what Kamara's market demands, but, you got that, holding on to Dennis Allen for too long, and like Jared's saying, now you got to start selling because you're 2-6 now. And
7.
You lose 2-7, and one of those losses are to the Panthers. So it doesn't look good for the Saints.
And additionally, they had all their players and former players just mouthing
Michael
off.
Thomas.
Yeah, during the game and after the game. And I thought it was funny because I think it was Cam Jordan that was like, man, we lost to the Panthers. How does that happen or whatever? And then a Panthers player replied and was like, bro, we got the same record as y'all. I don't know what you're talking about. So, yeah, massive DB list, Dennis Allen. By the way, I mean, if you listen to this show, for 2 years, I have been calling for this dude's job to be taken away. So
yeah, I mean, he's such a questionable coach. It's pretty bad how bad he is. So
yeah,
I mean, that's long overdue for the Saints.
Yeah, that's my first candidate. I don't know if you have a second candidate in there.
I do, and it's the Bucks. I was going off last night watching that game in the group chat with you guys. I mean, Monday Night Football, the Bucks are out. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, They're going into the Chiefs' kingdom. Chiefs are the only undefeated team left in the NFL, and you're going in kind of handicapped, and you somehow scrap your way into winning that football game. You get down, you have a chance to beat Patrick Mahomes. You get down, you have one timeout left with, I think, a minute left on the clock, and you're on your 40. They complete that mesh route right over the middle. They get down to the 2-yard line, basically the goal line, with 30 seconds left. And this is just the start. Todd Bowles calls a timeout. And you're like, bro, let the clock run down, call a timeout at like 15 seconds, and then you have 2 opportunities to run a play. But instead, on the 30-second mark, he calls a timeout. They get down there. They're down by 7. I think it was 24-17 was the score.
Yeah, yep.
The first play they run, incompletion. The second play they run, they score. And in my head, I'm like, okay, going for 2, no questions asked. We're in over our heads. We've got Mahomes on his heels. It's 24-23 with like 20 seconds left. Let's go for 2. If we lose, we're supposed to lose. If we get the 2, then they got to go all the way down the field and put something together. And they're depleted as well because, Mahomes was hobbling off the field right there at the end of the game because of what he did the last time they scored. Instead, he kicks the field goal, or he kicks the PAT and ties the ball game up, kicks the ball off to Mahomes with 25 seconds left and 3 timeouts to go all the way down the field. They ended up not doing it. Then you go into overtime, you lose the coin toss, and Mahomes just walks right down the field and wins the ball game.
Yep. And you saw it instantly in Baker Mayfield's reaction.
Yeah,
oh my God.
That was just that's terrible game management, and people have been questioning Todd Bowles for a while. But to do that in a situation where you're 4-4, and like I was just saying, you're playing the Chiefs in one of the most hostile environments in the NFL, and you have a chance to win that game. Why aren't you trying to win that game? Makes 0 sense to me. So I have Todd Bowles. Go ahead.
Yeah. What's interesting to me is, was it a week ago when Chris Godwin suffered his injury, they're down by like 10 playing to win. Yeah. Like when there's no hope. They're like, we got to win this game. Anything, at any cost, we're throwing the ball. We're going balls to the wall trying to win this game. And then you play Mahomes and you're like, we're playing to lose. We're playing for the tie. It just makes 0 sense to me.
That's another parallel. Is like you already lost Mike Evans. You don't have a chance to win that game, and you're airing that bitch out trying to get Auden hurt with hospital balls. You're trying to, and then you end up losing Chris Godwin on a meaningless 3rd down play.
Yep.
Late in the game with no chance to win. I mean, you think he would learn, and he did nothing to win that game for the Chiefs last night, or for the Bucs last night. I mean, it's just unbelievable that they even try, or didn't even try to go for 2 there. It's just sad watch.
My last DB list candidate is, and this one could be in every single week, but it's the Dallas Cowboys front office. So this morning, the Dallas Cowboys, this is Tuesday morning, traded for Jonathan Mingo for a 4th round pick, and they received Mingo in a 7th round pick. And what's so funny to me is that this receiver was liked from the Dallas Cowboys front office 2 years ago in the draft, was picked 2nd round by the Carolina Panthers out of Ole Miss. He's just kind of been a no-show for them. He's buried in the depth chart and behind Deontay, who was traded, and Leggett, who just stepped in, and Adam Thielen. So he has had his chance over 2 years to kind of like show out, but really no Panther has been able to like really excel. I mean, honestly, you're seeing sparks from Leggett, but my point with this is you traded a 4th for Mingo, and then for Devontae Adams, they traded a 4th. Other teams got him, or the Jets got him for a 4th. The Marshawn Lattimore, I think, was latter round picks. And then Mike Williams was a 5th round pick. So you got all these other players for cheap, and you went and got a buried 2-year wide receiver, kind of a failed project thus far for really good draft capital for the Panthers. Like, you gave the Panthers a 4th round. I'm like, can we do anything right? And, as a Cowboys front office, I just thought it was silly. I thought it was funny, and it's massive DB list. And on top of that, you have Dak saying, we fucking suck.
That's what I had on there. So.
Yeah, that one I knew we both would have, which he's 100% right. They do, and it's okay to say it.
It's okay to say we suck because they do suck. But you're also right because the other one you didn't mention is Amari Cooper.
We
got a 5th round pick for Amari Cooper, and we're giving who is a formidable, clear as day, great receiver, and we gave him away for a 5th round pick. And now we're getting a guy that I liked during the draft. I've said that on the podcast when this thing first started. But he in the NFL he's done nothing, and so. What a waste. And it's laughable. It's like a clear move that Jerry Jones got tired of hearing all the crap that people were saying about him and just went out there and was like, see, I did something. And you're like, that's not what you need to do.
No, Jerry.
So, yeah.
Jeffrey Simmons, the defensive tackle for Tennessee, is available. Go trade for him. It's that meme where the guy's wiping his sweat off the forehead and there's the 2 buttons sitting there. And he's like, it's panic and get Jonathan Mingo, just quote unquote do something or sell. And he's like, oh, Jonathan Mingo.
But on top of that,
accepted that call and they were like, you want what? A 4th rounder?
Absolutely, we'll take it.
Mingo? I don't know anything about Mingo.
But I saw another good tweet. I think it was from Marcus Mosher, and he was talking about. He's like, they clearly did this just to do something, and it was the perfect Jones way because it was cheap. And the other thing he was like. What's even scarier is Jerry Jones probably doesn't even know who this is. This could be the act of Will Clay, our GM, our assistant GM, and Stephen Jones, which is an even worse scenario because eventually when Jerry Jones passes, Stephen Jones is going to take over, and don't expect this to get any better. So that's where this is. Yeah. It's just comical. We're a clown show organization that's just going to keep getting embarrassed.
Yep.
So.
All right, let's move on into your stats analysis segment, and then we'll do our recap and predictions for NFL.
Yeah, so mine's going to be pretty quick. It was a pretty uneventful week of the NFL. I already talked to Jared a little bit about it before we started. He took my stat. I was going to talk about, it was actually a perfect lead into this. I was going to talk about the draft capital and all of that the Cowboys gave up and all the moves that people are making at the deadline. You can see who's serious and who's not serious. And the other one that I thought was pretty serious was the Commanders, going to get Marshawn Lattimore. I'm sure Lattimore's pretty happy about that. They don't, they're not paying Daniels a lot. So it makes a lot of sense. They're in a perfect position, a prime position to kind of win the NFC East if they can pull off beating the Eagles, which that puts them in a better position to do so. So I don't know if the Commanders can pull it off. I still think the Eagles are probably the better team. The best team in the NFC right now, despite everything that's going well for the Commanders. So I think that's a great move. The other one I had on here was Deontay Johnson for the Ravens. Honestly, yeah. I think that adds to the Ravens, but I don't see it really making a ton of difference because of what I've talked about, and I actually have it on here later. The Ravens if any receiver you have for the Ravens, they just always... it's it's a shuffle and play. They, 1 minute it could be Zay Flowers, Bateman could catch a long pass, Andrews could get involved, Likely could get involved. I mean, the only consistent players on that team is going to be Lamar and Derrick Henry in terms of fantasy. So I think in terms of production it will help them, but in terms of fantasy, I don't really see how that helps Deontay a ton. But it's interesting to see all these moves getting played at the deadline. Who's selling? Who's buying? And you can see who's really competent in the front offices and who's not. So that's the point that Jared made. But anyway, we'll go into stats. So quarterback of the week. It's a pretty sleepy week. I already kind of mentioned it. A lot of games that were just blowouts or completely boring. Joe Burrow was the first one that came to mind to me. I mean, he had 27 of 39, 251 yards and 5 touchdowns. Granted, it was the Raiders, but 5 touchdowns is always a good day in my book. I don't care who you're playing. That's
and none to Jamar Chase.
That's what I have on here. Is none of them went to Jamar Chase, and it was without Higgins, and with all the Burton drama, it's just funny because you can tell the Bengals have had a rough year, and I think Joe Burrow's finally started getting pissed off just from all the videos that were coming out of him walking around looking like he had a resting bitch face and yelling at some people and, kind of walking off the field the way he did. You could tell he's starting to get a little fed up, which is maybe good for Joe Burrow because he's always kind of quiet. Kind of reminds me of our older brother Travis when he plays. He just leads by example, doesn't really say much, even kind of quiet at the stand when he's getting interviewed. But dud of the week, I had Caleb Williams on here last week, but my God, I had to go with him again. I know he's a rookie, but some of the clips that have came out of this game were absolutely brutal. One of them being DJ Moore walking off the field, and I think Jared did a good job. I saw his tweet on this commenting on it. He was like, everybody's blaming DJ Moore, but the fact that you're watching Caleb Williams drop back, he had plenty of time to throw a football. Yeah. He had multiple receivers open, and he's running from his life, just trying to create a play. And the receiver's like, dude, throw the ball. I mean, I'm open. And so I think it just kind of speaks to what everybody worried about with Caleb Williams in terms of his playing in the at USC. I mean, Jared and I talked about it a lot when he was there. He takes too long to throw the ball, and he runs around and tries to create too much instead of just throwing the football. And he's at his best, and he's shown us that he's at his best when he takes those. He's got 3 really good receivers. I would say pretty decent. Odunze, Allen, and DJ Moore, who is magnificent. And, he's not doing much with it. So I don't know if that's the coach, which we've talked about before. It might be the coach. I think he gets fired too if they don't, get the ship right, which is very unlikely with the schedule that we've talked about. But I know he's a rookie too. I'll give him a little bit of slack there, but being the first round pick, you gotta. Sadly, the NFL, I think you need to give people development, but sadly the NFL is do or die on the first pick. I mean, you've seen it with Bryce Young. So I don't know if you have any comments on those first 2, and then I'll move into running backs.
Yeah, I spoke about the Caleb Williams on my previous episode, and my main argument with that, if you missed it, was what are you doing? It's 2nd and 6 at plus territory, and you miss your first read, you roll out to the left, all the receivers flow with the traffic towards you. 2 of them are open. DJ Moore comes into the screen, open on the comeback route along the sideline. You ignore all of those, flip a 3rd time, sprint all the way back to the other side. That's when DJ Moore just walks off the field because he's like, what are we doing? Yeah. And throws a dirt ball for incomplete 3rd and 6. So on 2nd and 6, when you could have hit a check down, when you could have thrown to Cole
get any kind of yardage, get in a positive situation,
or just throw the damn ball away. This isn't USC. You're I had people saying, oh man, the announcers don't know what to do. They're sitting there going, holy smokes, this is a lot like Jaden Daniels. No, Jaden Daniels actually gets productive on these sorts of things, the Hail Mary, for instance, against Caleb Williams. I'm looking at him and it's how is this good football? This isn't good quarterback play. This is backyard football, that annoying 6th grader that you would play with in your grade that would just run around and never throw to you. That's what it is. I mean, it's nonsense to me. It's a massive regression from a rookie that had a good 2 weeks in a row a couple weeks back, and it's just looking worse. And yes, it can be the coach, but when you have all those weapons, it is really, really hard to act like an idiot. And he just has been. No, I don't know. It just now you're sitting looking at 3rd and 6 and your offensive line is just
yeah, you got all your players gassed. Then I don't know. I watched that play, and that would have been my move. Try and force it to DJ Moore. If it ended up incomplete, fine. If you could have ran, take off on that first turn, you could have ran, gotten 2 or 3 yards, slid. Now you're in a 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3. You got multiple play calls, but it's just hard to watch right now. And I think you're seeing, we've been talking about, you're just seeing a ton of that around the league, and it's getting repetitive to mention it on the podcast. It's just oh my gosh, somebody show some quarterback play. So I'm starting to feel empty inside because all these new guys are coming in and it's just like backyard football. But
if anything, real quick, if anything, it should show you how difficult it is to find a new face of the franchise.
Yes,
so for all those wondering what certain teams should do with their current quarterback, this should show you that regardless of how good you are at college, it is not an easy plug and play. So
no.
Give it up to your best chance to win.
Coaching matters along with that too. I mean, you can't just buy. Like, I don't think Bryce Young. I mean, he might be bad, but Bryce Young is receiving zero development. He's gonna suck in the NFL. Like
he doesn't have a choice anymore.
C.J. Stroud had a good year last year. He's having going through a sophomore slump right now, but he's got good development. He's going to stay good.
Yeah.
Anthony Richardson, on the other hand. Maybe not, because they keep pulling him and putting him back in, and he's not that good. I talked about him last time on the podcast, but I mean, there's positives to having people sit for a little bit and for a year, or Patrick Mahomes did that when he got in the league. Granted, he has Andy Reid, so he's gonna keep developing, but Jordan Love sat for a couple years, and Jordan Love doesn't look half bad. He's got a turnover problem, but There's positives, and it's not as easy as it looks. So, yeah. I mean, we'll wrap that up there. But my gosh, it's just tough to watch sometimes.
Yep.
I'll move on to running backs. Running back of the week. This one's so easy. I don't even have to tell you his stats. That fucking play was nuts. Saquon Barkley.
Yeah.
That was unbelievable. I've never seen anything like that in my life. If I was on the field and somebody did a backwards hurdle like that, and I was on defense, take your helmet off. We're done. We're done. So if you're going in for a tackle and somebody's jumping over you backwards after making two of your other defenders miss, get off the field. So he had 27 carries, 159 yards, a touchdown, and then he added 3 catches, 40 yards, and a touchdown. The Eagles' offense is good. It's the Kellen Moore question that we always have is like, will it stay good against good defenses? And they're kind of getting healthy, so that's why I still think the Eagles are I think they're going to win the division in the NFC East. As for my dud of the week, almost went Nick Chubb, but he's averaging like 2.5 yards a carry, but I'm not going to pick him because he had a massive injury, and that just feels unfair. So I got to go with the Jags running game. It might be as worse or even worse than the Cowboys. And I started thinking, like, is their O-line better than Dallas? Probably not. But they do have the better backs. I mean, they've got Tank Bigsby and Etienne, and Etienne's been pretty good in the NFL, and Tank Bigsby has shown a lot of promise. But going 3 of 24 for Travis Etienne, and Tank had 8 attempts for 22 yards, and that's 18 attempts for 60 yards total as a team, which averages out to about 3 yards a carry. That's pretty bad. So it goes back to, this is the same game they played the Eagles. Granted, the Eagles' interior is pretty nuts, but man, that's a terrible stat line. So I don't know if you have anything to add on the running backs.
No, not really. I'll let you move on to the receivers.
Okay. Whiteout of the week. Mentioned the Ravens earlier. I had him on as a dud last, I think, 2 weeks ago. Zay Flowers, 5 catches, 127 yards, and 2 touchdowns against Denver. That's pretty big. Denver's got a great defense. But, like I've said before, you never really know who's going to get the ball in the Ravens, and they never stay hot. So, it's good for Zay Flowers to get involved. I think, obviously, he's the number 1 there on the Ravens. I don't see Deontay really taking that over. I just feel like Zay Flowers really fits with what Lamar is best at. So it really gives him a good RPO, flat, bubble, screen, hitch, out option. And then he can still burn down the field. So moving on to my dud of the week, I got Jalen Waddle. His stat line ended up negative because of a massive play trying to win the game right there at the end with the Bills. He caught the ball, or somebody caught the ball, flipped it to him, and then he ran like 20 yards behind the line of scrimmage and got tackled. So his stat line wasn't even worth mentioning. I think it was like 2 receptions, -4 yards, and a touchdown. But, he's kind of flown under the radar. And I know that Tua has been out, but he's had a very disappointing season. And with the Dolphins being a 2-win team, kind of seems like a good time for them to sell, at least to me, because let's not forget that Tyreek's getting kind of old. They got a lot of speed in the backfield. Probably could use some offensive line help. I don't think they have a chance in hell of winning that division against the Bills, especially after dropping this one.
Yeah.
So, it wouldn't be a bad idea to sell for the Dolphins. And, I think a lot of teams would have paid for Jalen Waddle, given he's under a contract. Probably could have gotten like a second or a third for him.
Yeah, that's right.
So, excuse me. So that's really all I got for the stats. Like I said, it's been a tough couple of weeks watching the NFL in terms of some things. So
yes, I definitely have. I definitely think Jackson Smith and Njigba should be mentioned for sure. He had an outstanding week. I think he had like 180 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I almost went with him. I just felt like Zay Flowers against Denver was a great pick because Denver shut down a lot of people.
Yeah, because they have Patrick Surtain over there, and their defense historically this year has been very, very under the radar good. But yeah, I mean Jackson Smith, when he got his chance to play, and a lot like Mingo should have had, played outstanding. So yeah, that's really my only comment on that. Is that Jackson Smith and Jigba basically saved my fantasy team.
Yeah, he's good.
So, all right, well, let's go. Let's recap the Detroit Lions at the Green Bay Packers. This was a rough one. It was, just pure rain the entire time, drenched jerseys in Lambeau Field. I feel like there was multiple games where it was raining this weekend, but the Detroit Lions come out with the win, 24-14. Had some garbage points at the end from the Green Bay Packers. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I honestly, with this one, the Lions just continue to roll. I mean, the play calling doesn't matter if it rains, sleets, or snows. They're playing the same type of brand of football every single week. They were bashed for not being able to play in a dome, so they come into a undomed environment, an open environment with pouring down rain, and they got the better half of that. It's basically what really all I've got on this. Like, weather was an issue. And Detroit basically got the better half of the weather adversity. So an excellent game. And then kind of finished things out with Jahmyr Gibbs on the ground. He didn't really do too much most of the game, but then towards the end it was just gashing them. And Sonic and Knuckles once again strike. But that's really all I have on the game, to be honest. A great win for Detroit Lions and a poor-some loss for the Packers, but I think they're still kind of banged up.
Yeah, a little bit. But I think that's a big win for Detroit. And I think not only it's a big win for Detroit internally, like on their football team, but it's a big win for Detroit in terms of critics. I think what you took some of my points there, but one of them I had was like everyone's biggest argument is like they're a dome team, can't really play outside. You can guarantee all of your dome games because they play a lot of dome games this year just based off their schedule. But everybody's like, yeah, but when you get in the playoffs, you're not going to be able to like pick and choose where you play. You can get home field advantage, but you got to really fight for it. Long season, blah 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 blah. But they came out in the rain away against a division rival and kind of beat them into submission. Even losing their best player on defense, Brian Branch, I think got ejected in this game. So that's huge for the Lions. I think it's a statement win. They already had a statement win against Minnesota. Then they come out against another division rival and show them up at their home field. So I think that's big. That's big for them. I mean, Dan Campbell said after the game, we can play in any condition. We are built to win. And I think that shows they had 2 fourth-down touchdowns. That just shows the aggressiveness. So not only that, they're also adding Zadarius Smith.
Yep.
They traded for him with the loss of Aiden Hutchinson, and I think they're my pick to go to the Super Bowl right now for the NFC. I said last week that I think that the Packers were maybe going to put up a fight and maybe get because they're eventually going to have a trip up game, but it didn't happen here. They they beat the ever-loving hell out of Green Bay at their place in the rain. So I had them winning 28-27, but 24-14 Lions. I noticed earlier when we were looking at picks, I've been right a ton. I haven't gotten the score, but I've been picking the winners. So I keep looking back. I'm like, oh, hell yeah, I got that one right.
The score is the hard. I mean, you almost never can predict what a score is, but
it's tough. But it's always fun to throw out a number.
Yeah, and I thought the last thing I would say about this game, I thought it was hilarious that in the last part of the game, towards the 2-minute warning, the Lions threw the ball when they were just going to kneel it out. They threw, play action, hit a check down for a first down. It was like, hey, just remember,
just
we're
remember,
daddy, and that's the kind of brand of football that I think is attracting a lot of fans into that city. So, which kind of brings us into our predictions, which also involves Detroit. Detroit moving to 7-1, going into Houston 6-3. Houston's coming off that loss to the New York Jets on Thursday Night Football this past week. Detroit, hot as fire, coming into NRG. I think this is going to be a pretty good matchup, but I'm curious to think what you think about it, and then I'll follow up with mine.
Yeah, it's a Sunday Night Football game. Detroit minus 3.5, over under 49.5. Last week I said, like I was just saying, Detroit has been on a roll. I'm not sure it's going to stop them. I thought the Packers had a chance, but no dice there. I don't think it's the Texans either. I think they are struggling on offense. It's been pretty evident in C.J. Stroud's sophomore regression. But it's not only C.J. Stroud, it's kind of them as a team. O-line's been struggling. They've lost Diggs. They're getting Nico back. I think this game, not for certain, but from what I read this morning, there's a good chance he's back. So that'll be good. But, I don't think you can have room for error against the best team in the NFC right now. And I think the Texans have a lot of errors right now. And I just see the Lions kind of taking control. I think this is a home game for the Lions as well. So I think Lions being back in their dome and taking care of the Texans, I think, is what I see. So 28-14 Lions. I would definitely take that minus 3.5. I just don't see how the Texans pull this one off in the state they're in.
Yeah, I was very similar with my analysis of this prediction. I kind of mentioned that the Stroud sophomore slump, but I think those injured receivers are going to play a huge factor because Detroit is healthy. I mean, outside of Aiden Hutchinson, I mean, they just traded for Za'Darius Smith to patch up that edge rush attack, and they got the Sonic and Knuckles. They got Brock Wright, at tight end, ready to rumble, and kicking and blocking and all that fun stuff.
Oh, and they get Jamison Williams back.
Williams returning this week. So offense in full swing versus an offense that has a lot of missing parts. I think Mixon will probably get a large workload in this game. He's going to need to be effective out of the pass. But I really do believe that Detroit rolls through this one with a 27-17 win, and this game is in Houston at Energy.
Oh, okay. So, I thought still that's dome basically.
Yeah, dome play. So unless they roll out I don't know if it doesn't roll out. I don't think
it does roll out, but I mean it's very rare that they open it.
Yeah, because
especially with all this rain this week down quality here, it's not gonna.
Yeah, everybody would be, inhaling oil and gas fumes if you open the windows. So, but yeah, I got Detroit winning. Did you do your score prediction for this one, or
28-14?
28-14. Okay. All right. Moving into Pittsburgh at the Washington Commanders. Pittsburgh has moved to 6-2. Washington Commanders are now at 7-2. Both of these teams made a blockbuster trade at the deadline this morning, Tuesday. Pittsburgh traded a fifth for Mike Williams from the Jets, so they get their quote-unquote wide receiver too, if he's healthy enough. And then Washington traded, I don't remember what the pick compensation was, but they traded for Marshawn Lattimore from the New Orleans Saints and acquired a high-level cornerback. I don't believe he's let up a touchdown since 2021. So Washington and Pittsburgh did what they needed to do to increase their chances of going to get the Lombardi Trophy this year. Russell Wilson versus Jaden Daniels. I think this game is going to be interesting because Washington, whenever Dan Quinn plays a good team, I just don't think their defense really shows up.
No.
And people have ignored that this year. I think with Dallas, all eyes were on, Dan Quinn, when they play a good team, they don't show up. And then you look at Washington this year, and all you hear is, holy shit, they're 7-2, they're contenders. Well, they look at the teams that they played that are good, and they let up a shit ton of points every time. And this is a different scenario. I think Pittsburgh's offense is not high-powered. It is a good team, but it's not like a high-powered offense. I think that this game is low-scoring, scrappy, but Jaden Daniels has not played a defense like Mike Tomlin's so far in his career. I think that Pittsburgh wins this game in a tight one. I think they field goal each other to death. And this is the game of turnovers. I think Pittsburgh wins 20-16 in Washington.
I think that's a good pick. I had on here, I keep waiting for the Commanders to break down. I think that team is that's what I keep saying. Don't get me, I've talked to a lot of people about this. I'm like, don't get me wrong. Don't think I have Cowboys bias. I don't do all that. I do think Daniels has not been a bad quarterback. I think he's been great. I think he probably wins Offensive Rookie of the Year. But I just look at their schedule, look at who they've played, and I'm like, I'm not really impressed a ton by what's gone on there. So, the Steelers to me are like the buzzsaw of the NFL. Like, this is your litmus test. When you have to play them, they just kind of find a way to beat you sometimes. And as much as I give Wilson shit, they are a better team with Russell Wilson at the helm and not Justin Fields. I mean, he even told you that. So I think I completely agree with Jared. I think Mike Tomlin and the Steelers defense find a way to stop Daniels, and they put up some points on this offense. Or on this Commanders defense. I think they find a way to kind of shred them. So I got Steelers 24-20. I still think that, I just said, I still think the Steelers are going to stop them a lot on defense, but I still think Jaden Daniels is still special enough to put up some kind of points. I mean, in my opinion, if Dak can put up points against this team with what he did, I would expect Jaden Daniels, with how everybody's talking about him, to do somewhat of the same. But I still have the Steelers winning this game. I think this is where you kind of see the breaks for the Commanders.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, all right, let's move into our college football segment with our winners and losers and our predictions for number 11 Alabama at number 14 LSU. We'll start with the winners of the previous week, and I'll let you go first. Who is your winner from last week's college football slate?
So my winner is SMU. They beat Pittsburgh, and they beat them handily. They beat them 48-25. A lot of people were expecting good things from SMU this entire season, and what was big was they switched from Preston Stone. I think they lost their first two games. Were really struggling with Preston Stone, and then they switched him out for Jennings, this backup quarterback from Oak Cliff, and they've been on fire ever since. Saban, called out Jennings and said that he might be one of the most underrated players in college football right now, and I'm not sure he's wrong. If you go check out his stats, he's got really impressive stats, and SMU's been putting up a ton of points against every team they've played. I think the last 4 games, I think they've scored 20 plus, 30 plus, 40 plus, and mind you, Pittsburgh, I think, was ranked 17 or in the teens somewhere, and SMU just routed them. So I expect SMU to keep doing that. They're not a bad team. And if you're wondering how I just pulled all of that out and know all these players, I run SMU in our dynasty. So I'm very familiar with a lot of the SMU football team, as I am an online head coach for them.
That's right. I would say, my first winner is going to be South Carolina. I think they really showed out at home in the night game against Texas A&M, who was coming off a huge win to LSU, and they got the chance to game plan for essentially their own quarterback. And I think that means a lot for a team that, you go and practice every day against Sellers, quarterback for South Carolina, and you get 7 days to prep for Marcel Reed, who was going to reemerged as a starter over Wegman this week in a night game in South Carolina, which South Carolina was robbed of a win earlier in the year against LSU. Should be a 7-2 team. I think they're one of the most underrated teams in college football, especially when you play them at home. That was an excellent win for them. They finished strong. I mean, just touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. It was a complete collapse from Texas A&M at the end of that game. That was the game that A&M needed to win. So you could classify A&M as a miniature loser there for sure. I had them written down. I feel like every week I talk about A&M, so I'll list them as a loser, but I won't go too deep. I just feel like every week it's A&M. So maybe they're just headline news. But do you have another winner, or do you want to go to losers? Oh, hold on, you're muted, I think.
Sorry, I was clicking around. I didn't want people to hear my mouse. But yeah, I mean, you got to talk about A&M right now, kind of the same way you got to talk about Texas. They're both kind of in the driver's seat, along with Georgia in the SEC. Especially given that A&M is tied for first place right now. They control their own destiny. So, I mean, you got to talk about A&M. In terms of other winners, I had Ohio State on there just because I feel like you had to put them on there with that big win against Penn State, even though I don't think Ohio State is as good as everybody says they are. The other one I had was soft. The other one I had on there was Sam Houston State. I keep shouting them out, but they're bowl eligible. They're not scoring a lot of points right now because the quarterback's injured, but they're now bowl eligible at 7-2. So shout out to the boys that, my boys down over there in Huntsville, Texas. But that's a big turnaround, playing money ball, being able to do it. So 7-2. That's a big win. I'm trying to look around here and see if I see any other winners. I
had another one that was under the radar for sure. It was University of Houston upsetting Kansas State 24-19. So Kansas State, they lost to BYU earlier in the year. Now they take an L to what at the time was a 3-5 Houston team. So Ohio State kind of classifies as that I don't want no scrubs kind of first four out sort of thing, because I'm sure they'll win more games and finish 10-2 at best. But that's a brutal loss if you're in the hunt for a college football playoff appearance, and a loss to Houston is one that you do not want on your resume. So Houston, great win for them over there. So
the other one I had on here was Army. Army is still undefeated. So they beat Air Force this week 20-3.
I saw a cool stat. I think it was the first time since I think it was before 1960 that they were in the top 20 of college football rankings, and they reached as high as 10th in the nation at that time. It was early. It was like it was before 1962. I know that because I guessed 1962. But it's interesting. Shout out! I mean, Navy and Army both really good this year. Might be a sign that we should all go play football over there and run the wishbone.
Yeah.
All right, our losers of the week. I'll go first on this one. I had Iowa State as my primary loser this week. They lost to Texas Tech 23-22. This one is just baffling to me because Texas Tech, I talked about it a little bit on my Shadow Script episode, is that Texas Tech is not a team that you should lose in a low-scoring affair to. It's just not. Like, they are your type of team that you got to score, in order for them to win, they need to score 40+. And it's just kind of embarrassing for them to be undefeated and then lose 23-22 in a low-scoring affair to Texas Tech. If you know who Texas Tech is, it's that high-scoring affair. We're going to score more points than you type, football. Everybody run 4 verts, 7-on-7 football. Like, yeah, that's just a bad loss in my opinion. I think both that's Big 12. I'm assuming too. Iowa State and Kansas State both with really bad losses. So,
that was and on top of that, this loss has kind of been coming for for Iowa State though. I mean, they beat UCF 38-35 last week, and they've had a couple close games since. So, this has kind of been looming over the heads of Iowa State for a while now.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I had them in my my category this week of ain't too proud to beg. So, do you have any more losers?
Yeah, I mean, I had A&M, kind of like we talked about, disappointing
Yeah.
loss. They ran into, I like the word buzzsaw this week. South Carolina is not a joke of a football team, and it feels like they do this every year to some ranked opponent. But going out there and the way they did it was very tough to watch for A&M. They still control their destiny, but it is not promising whatsoever. They had to win this game to kind of stay on top, and they didn't. And then now you got to go try and win out and play UT at home, which is good. I still think they have a decent chance of winning that game, but they got to figure out Marcel Reed and the Connor Weigman situation. I'm not sure Reed is the answer either. The other one I had outside of A&M was Penn State.
Yeah.
Absolutely tough watch to be up 10 at home and just give the game away. On top of that, they were pulling out everything during this game, and none of it worked. I mean, at one point, Jared and I were watching the game together, and they motioned down. I literally watched them send their left tackle out on the sideline to basically get motioned in and do like a crack play, and he missed his block, and the guy ended up tackling the ball carrier on fourth down. So they pulled everything out of their ass to try and win this game, and it just none of it worked. And I think they missed if they want any chance of moving forward, I think they need to move on from their coach because they simply cannot compete with the big dogs of the Big Ten. Like when Michigan was good, they couldn't beat Michigan. This is probably the worst team Ohio State's had in a little bit and can't beat Ohio State. So I just don't think that coach is right. I don't think Penn State has the right culture right now. So I always thought they were overrated. They just are getting ranked high because they're in the Big Ten, and they're kind of a higher echelon or upper echelon program. It's kind of like reminds me of Notre Dame. So they don't really ever win a lot.
Penn State could be 8-4 and be in the top 12. That's what drives me nuts about teams like that. And they are who I thought they were. That I've been preaching on for 2 weeks. So. It's just that type of brand of football is not sustainable. So, okay, predicting number 11 Alabama 7-2 versus 6-2, excuse me, at number 14 LSU, and they're 6-2 as well. Both coming off a bye. This is your College GameDay matchup. What are your keys to success in this game for either team and your impact players? What's your projections on this one?
I think this is pretty simple to me. I think Bama's had some issues, obviously. But I think LSU has bigger issues. It goes back to what I said about the LSU A&M game when we predicted it. I still think Brian Kelly has a lot of trouble winning big games in the bright lights down south in SEC football. I don't think he's a great coach for the LSU. I wouldn't be shocked if they move on from him, at the end of this year or next, if things continue in that direction. And, the Bama's had issues too, but I think the way that Bama plays and how Jalen Milroe is, you saw the difference maker that Marcel Reed was against the LSU Tigers.
Yeah.
When A&M beat LSU. Well, Jalen Milroe's better than that. And he's shown that he can throw a football. So I think the the Tigers might have some major problems on their hands, and I got Alabama winning this game like 31-17, 31-14, something like that.
Yeah,
so
damn. Okay.
I don't think it's going to be close. I think Bama kind of runs with it, and you watch another Brian Kelly masterclass. So that's my prediction.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I like that take because I'm going kind of the same direction with Alabama winning. I think Jalen Milroe is going to be the key impact player of this game because if he can find a way to catch his groove, I said this before, when Jalen Milroe is playing at his best, they are I think the toughest team to beat in college football. Atop of Georgia, which they showed already earlier this year. And, losing to Tennessee in one of their biggest rivalry games isn't one to necessarily completely freak out over. The one that everyone freaked out over was Vanderbilt. Like if they had beat Vanderbilt and their only loss was to Tennessee away, like I would have been like, oh, I'm still sold on this Alabama team. So I still kind of am, but they got some problems to figure out, their passing game in particular. If Jalen Milroe can figure that out on Saturday, then I think Alabama goes and wins this game in Baton Rouge. And I think for LSU to win this game, those wide receivers are going to have to be stepping up big time at night. They are one of the wide receiver U's. They need to start acting like it. And Nussmeier is going to have to find those guys to win. I just think Nussmeier gets in his own head and gets rattled, as we saw in the A&M game. But whoever runs the ball better, I think, wins this game. But if Jalen Milroe is on with his passing, this is going to be a 31-27 dub for Alabama. So that's what I got. Roll Tide, baby. We don't give a shit about nothing but the Tide.
Yeah, I just don't think.
And here we are again at 7-3.
I just don't think it's going to be close.
I hope you're right. I just think that's a rivalry game. Like that's that's the only reason I have the close aspect of this final. So, all right. Well, that wraps us up. We are at the hour mark on the dot. And we're going to have another repeat guest for the Challenge the Script episode releasing Friday morning. This will be the Alabama at LSU game. I'll have my buddy Turner returning for that one. And we have 2 open slots the next 2 weeks, so I'm going to fill those in with some guys that have requested to be repeat guests. But this has been a fun edition of the Stats and Scars. Hopefully the next week or so we'll have the medical guy return and get that trio action back in motion. But yeah, you can follow us on the Shadow of the Script on all platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, as well as video and commenting analysis on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter using the handle at Shatter the Script. And you can follow us on all those platforms. All right, like and share with your friends. Find us Stats and Scars every Thursday, 7 a.m. And the Analyst, good to have you. The ball whisperer. All right, we'll catch y'all next week.